Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Endeavour, staring at the strange signal on his screen. The message was weak and broken, coming from a distant star system that most ships avoided. The words were in the ancient Kithara language, a tongue that few beings in the galaxy dared to learn. "Captain, are you sure we should respond to this?" asked Dr. Emily Carter, the ship's scientist who studied alien life. She looked worried as she read the translation on her tablet. "This is coming from Drakmor, the Kithara homeworld. No one goes there." Jake nodded slowly. He had heard the stories about the Kithara since he was a child. They were the most feared hunters in the galaxy. Standing 12 feet tall with claws that could cut through steel, they had ruled entire star systems through fear. Their minds could reach into the thoughts of other beings, making them perfect predators. "The message says they need help," Jake said quietly. "Someone is asking for medical aid. Children are dying." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Michael Torres stepped forward, his dark eyes serious. "Captain, with respect, this could be a trap. The Kithara don't ask for help. They take what they want." Jake looked at the message again. The words seemed desperate, not threatening. "Set course for Drakmor," he ordered, "but keep our weapons ready." The journey to the Kithara system took 3 days. During that time, the crew prepared for the worst. They had heard stories of entire fleets disappearing near Kithara space. The aliens were known to hunt for sport, taking ships and their crews for their twisted games. As they approached Drakmor, the crew expected to see massive defense platforms and warships. Instead, they found empty space. The planet's orbital stations were dark and silent. No ships challenged their approach. "This is wrong," whispered Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez. "Where is everyone?" The planet below looked different than the reports described. Instead of the bright lights of Kithara cities, they saw only scattered fires and darkness. Huge sections of the world appeared abandoned. Jake ordered a careful approach. As they entered the atmosphere, they saw the ruins of once mighty cities. The great hunting lodges of the Kithara were empty shells. Streets that should have been filled with the massive aliens were completely deserted. "Captain, I'm picking up life signs," reported Engineer David Chen from his station. "But they're small, much smaller than adult Kithara." They landed near what had once been the capital city. Jake led a small team outside, wearing protective suits and carrying medical supplies. Dr. Carter and Dr. Torres came with him, along with Security Chief Commander Sarah Phillips. The sight that greeted them was beyond anything they had imagined. The great stone buildings of the Kithara were covered in strange red marks. The smell of death hung heavy in the air, but it was the sounds that broke their hearts. The weak crying of young voices calling out in pain and hunger. "My God," whispered Dr. Carter as they entered a large building that had been some kind of nursery. Inside were dozens of small creatures, each about the size of a human child. They looked like tiny versions of the feared Kithara hunters, but their eyes held no threat, only fear and sadness. The young Kithara cubs were starving. Their small bodies were covered in the same red marks they had seen on the buildings. Many lay still and quiet, too weak to move. Others cried out when they saw the humans backing away in terror. Dr. Torres immediately began examining the sick cubs. "This is some kind of disease," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "It looks like it affects the nervous system. The adults must have died first, leaving these little ones alone." Jake knelt down near one of the cubs, a small creature with golden fur and large, frightened eyes. The cub tried to crawl away but was too weak. Jake slowly reached out his hand, speaking in a soft voice. "It's okay, little one. We're here to help." Dr. Carter was scanning the area with her instruments. "Captain, I'm reading traces of biological warfare agents. This wasn't a natural disease. Someone did this to them." The team worked for hours, giving food and water to the cubs who could still eat. Dr. Torres treated the sickest ones with medicine from their ship. Slowly, some of the cubs began to respond. They stopped trying to hide and started watching the humans with curious eyes. As the day went on, they discovered more groups of orphaned cubs throughout the city. Hundreds of young Cathara had been left alone when their parents died. Without the adults to hunt for them and teach them, the cubs were helpless. "These aren't the monsters we were told about," Dr. Carter said as she watched a small cub accept food from her hand. "They're just children. Scared, hungry children." Jake stood in the center of the ruined nursery, looking at the dozens of cubs around him. Some were sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, their bellies full of human food. Others played quietly with simple toys the crew had brought from the ship. "We need to contact the Galactic Council," Commander Phillips suggested. "They need to organize relief efforts for these survivors." But Jake was already thinking ahead. He knew how the galaxy felt about the Cathara. For thousands of years, these aliens had been the biggest threat to peace. Most species would see this as a chance to make sure the Cathara never rose again. As night fell on Drakmor, the human crew set up temporary shelters for the cubs. They worked by lamplight, feeding the hungry and caring for the sick. The cubs began to trust them, some even falling asleep next to their human caretakers. Dr. Carter made a discovery that would change everything. As she studied the cubs, she found something amazing. Unlike their parents, the young Kithara showed no signs of the aggressive telepathic abilities that made adult Kithara so dangerous. Their minds were open and innocent, capable of forming bonds with other species. "Captain," she said quietly as they prepared to return to the ship, "I don't think these cubs will grow up to be like their parents. The violence, the hunting instincts, I think those were learned behaviors, not natural ones." Jake looked back at the sleeping cubs one last time. Tomorrow, he would have to make one of the hardest decisions of his career. He could follow orders and leave these children to die, or he could risk everything to save them. As he walked back to the Endeavor under the alien stars, Jake Morrison knew what his conscience demanded. The galaxy might turn its back on these orphaned children, but humanity would not. Ambassador Lucas Wright sat in his office aboard the Endeavor, staring at his communication screen with growing frustration. For the past 2 days, he had been trying to contact every major species in the Galactic Council. Each conversation had ended the same way, with rejection and cold refusal. "The Zenthari won't help," he reported to Captain Morrison during their morning meeting. "Ambassador Thek said that helping the Cathara cubs would be like raising baby wolves to eat their sheep." Captain Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes. He had spent another sleepless night in the medical bay, helping Dr. Torres care for the sickest cubs. 3 more had died during the night, and their small cries still echoed in his mind. "What about the Vortakians?" asked Dr. Emily Carter. She held a tablet showing her latest research on the cubs. "They pride themselves on being peaceful." Lucas shook his head sadly. "Commander Velk laughed at me. He said the galaxy would be a safer place without any Kithara at all. He actually thanked me for telling him they were dying." The bridge fell silent. Outside the viewports, they could see the ruins of the Cathara capital city. Smoke still rose from some buildings where fires had burned for weeks. In the distance, small groups of cubs searched through the rubble for food. "I tried the Hegemony Coalition next," Lucas continued. "Their response was even worse. Admiral Corvex said that anyone who helped the Cathara would be considered an enemy of peaceful species everywhere." Dr. Michael Torres entered the bridge, his medical coat stained with the strange blue blood of the Cathara cubs. His face looked older than his 40 years, marked by stress and sadness. "How many more did we lose?" asked Jake quietly. 2 this morning, Michael replied, his voice heavy. "But I think I'm starting to understand this disease better. It attacks the brain first, then spreads to the rest of the body. The adults probably died within days. but the cubs have stronger immune systems. Chief Engineer David Chen looked up from his workstation. Captain, I've been monitoring galactic news feeds. Word about our mission is spreading. Most of the reports are calling us crazy for being here. Jake walked to the viewport and looked down at the planet. Near their landing site, he could see a small group of cubs playing with some supplies the crew had left for them. The sight filled him with both hope and determination. "Show me what they're saying," he ordered. David brought up the news reports on the main screen. The headlines were harsh and cruel. "Humans risk galaxy for extinct monsters," read one. "Earthship aids future killers," said another. The worst was a live broadcast from the Galactic News Network. A Xanthari reporter stood in front of images of past Kythera attacks. "The humans have forgotten that these cubs will grow up to be the same beasts that destroyed 12 worlds and enslaved millions," the reporter said with disgust. "This misguided mercy will lead to future genocide." Commander Sarah Phillips clenched her fists as she watched. "They're treating those children like they're already guilty of crimes they haven't committed." "Crimes they might never commit," added Dr. Carter. "My research shows that young Kythera are completely different from adults. They learn their behavior from their parents. These cubs could be raised to be peaceful." Lucas tried one more communication attempt, this time to Earth Command directly. Admiral Rebecca Stone appeared on the screen, her expression stern and unforgiving. "Captain Morrison, I'm ordering you to leave Kythera space immediately," she said without greeting. "The Galactic Council has made their position clear. Any human involvement with the Kythera cubs will be seen as an act of war." Jake stepped forward. "Admiral, these are children. They're dying without our help." "They're the offspring of the galaxy's most dangerous predators," Admiral Stone replied coldly. "Earth cannot risk war with 12 allied species to save creatures. That will grow up to threaten us all." The communication ended abruptly. Jake stared at the blank screen, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. Save innocent children and risk war, or abandon them to die and keep the peace. Dr. Torres approached him quietly. "Captain, there's something you need to see." They walked together to the medical bay, where dozens of cubs were recovering from their illness. As they entered, something amazing happened. The cubs began making soft, happy sounds. Several of them reached out toward the humans with their small, clawed hands. "They recognize us," Dr. Torres explained. "They've bonded with the crew members, who've been caring for them. Watch this." He knelt down next to a small cub with silver fur. The creature immediately crawled into his arms, making contented purring sounds. Other cubs gathered around, seeking attention and affection from the humans. In all the reports about adult Kythera, there was never anything like this, Dr. Torres continued. They never showed affection to other species. But these cubs are different. They trust us completely. Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez entered the medical bay carrying her translation device. She had been working day and night to learn the cubs' simple language. One of the larger cubs approached her and spoke in broken human words. "Lisa, friend," the cub said carefully. "Lisa helps sick ones feel better." Lisa knelt down and hugged the small creature. "That's right, little one. We're all friends here." Jake watched the scene with growing conviction. These weren't the monsters the galaxy remembered. They were innocent children who had known only kindness from humans. They laughed at simple jokes, cried when they were hurt, and showed gratitude for every act of care. "Captain," Dr. Carter called from her research station, "I've been analyzing the cubs' brain patterns. They're developing emotional bonds with us that are stronger than anything recorded in Kythera biology. They're changing because of human contact. If to prove her point, a tiny cub with golden eyes approached Jake and held up its arms, asking to be picked up. Jake lifted the small creature, who immediately snuggled against his chest, content and safe. "The galaxy has made its choice," Jake said quietly, making his decision. "They've abandoned these children because of fear and hatred, but that doesn't Mean we have to. He looked around at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes. They had all fallen in love with the cubs, despite the risks. "We're going to save as many as we can," Jake announced. "Earth Command can court-martial me later. These children deserve a chance to live." Outside, more cubs had gathered near the ship, drawn by the smell of human food and the sound of laughter from the medical bay. They waited patiently, hoping for the kindness that only humans seemed willing to offer. The galaxy had turned its back on them, but humanity would not abandon the innocent. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his ready room, holding the official order from Earth Command. The message was clear: leave Cathara space immediately or face court-martial for disobedience. He crumpled the paper and threw it in the waste bin. "Computer, call all senior staff to the conference room," he said aloud. Within minutes, his core team had gathered. Dr. Emily Carter sat beside Dr. Michael Torres, both looking exhausted from their round-the-clock work with the Cubs. Engineer David Chen and Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez took seats across from them. Commander Sarah Phillips closed the door and activated privacy mode. "I'm going to be direct," Jake began. "Earth Command has ordered us to abandon these children and leave. The Galactic Council has threatened sanctions against humanity if we continue helping the Cubs. Anyone who stays with this mission will face serious consequences." He paused, looking at each face around the table. "I'm giving everyone a choice. Take a shuttle back to human space now or stay and help me evacuate as many Cubs as possible. If you stay, you'll be considered criminals by our own government." Dr. Torres was the first to speak. "Captain, I became a doctor to save lives. I don't care what species those lives belong to. I'm staying." "Those Cubs trust us," added Lisa. "Some of them are learning to say our names. How can we abandon children who see us as their family?" One by one, every officer chose to stay. Jake felt pride swell in his chest. His crew was risking everything for innocent children they had known for only a week. "Then it's settled," Jake said. "We're going to save every Cub we can find. David, how much room do we have on the ship?" David consulted his tablet. "If we convert cargo holds and use emergency life support, we could house maybe 200 Cubs. But it won't be comfortable." "Comfort doesn't matter," said Dr. Carter. "Staying alive does. I've identified over 300 Cubs in the capital city alone. There might be more in other settlements." Commander Phillips pulled up a map of the planet. "I can lead ground teams to search the outer cities. But we need to be careful. Some of the automated defense systems are still active." Jake studied the map. Red markers showed where they had already found groups of Cubs. Green areas marked places they hadn't searched yet. "We have maybe 3 days before Earth sends ships to force us to leave. That's not much time." The evacuation began immediately. The crew worked in shifts, with some members staying on the ship to care for Cubs while others searched the ruins below. It was dangerous work. Many buildings were unstable, and the alien technology could be unpredictable. Dr. Carter developed a system to approach frightened Cubs safely. She discovered they responded well to soft human voices and gentle movements. Most importantly, they seemed to understand that humans meant no harm. "Here, little one," she whispered to a scared Cub hiding in a collapsed building. "I have food for you." And warm blankets. The Cub, a small female with brown fur, peeked out from behind a broken wall. She was thin and weak, but her large eyes showed intelligence and hope. Slowly, she crept forward and accepted the food Dr. Carter offered. "Good girl," Dr. Carter said gently. "Let's get you somewhere safe." Similar scenes played out across the city. Commander Phillips found a group of 5 Cubs living in an old school building. Engineer Chen discovered twin Cubs who refused to be separated. Each rescue required patience and care. The most difficult rescue came on the second day. Lisa Rodriguez had located a group of Cubs trapped in a basement when the building above had collapsed. The Cubs were scared and hurt, crying for parents who would never come. "David, I need you to cut through this debris," Sarah called over her radio. "There are at least 6 cubs down there." David worked carefully with his cutting tools, knowing that one wrong move could bring down more rubble. It took 4 hours to create a safe passage. When they finally reached the cubs, they found them huddled together, protecting the smallest one who was badly injured. Dr. Torres rushed to treat the wounded cub while the others were brought to safety. "This little guy has a broken leg and some internal injuries," he reported, "but I think I can help him." Back on the ship, the cubs were adapting better than anyone expected. The medical bay had been expanded into a kind of nursery with soft bedding and warm lighting. Cubs who had been enemies in the wild now played together peacefully, sharing toys and food. The crew noticed something remarkable happening. Cubs who had been raised by different Kythera families were learning to communicate and cooperate. Without the competitive adult influence, they naturally formed friendships. "Look at this," Dr. Carter showed Jake footage from the nursery. 2 cubs were working together to solve a simple puzzle, taking turns and celebrating when they succeeded. Adult Kythera were always solitary hunters. These cubs are learning teamwork. But the most surprising development came when one of the cubs tried to help Lisa fix a broken communication device. The small creature watched her work intently, then handed her the exact tool she needed. "They want to help us," Lisa realized. "They're not just accepting our care, they want to contribute." The cubs began participating in simple ship tasks. They helped organize supplies, cleaned their living areas, and even assisted in caring for the younger, sicker cubs. Their natural strength and agility made them surprisingly useful crew members. On the 3rd day, Jake received another urgent message from Earth Command. Admiral Stone appeared on his screen, her face red with anger. "Morrison, you have 6 hours to leave Kythera space or we will send ships to arrest you," she declared. "The Galactic Council is threatening to break all treaties with Earth. You're risking war for these creatures." Jake looked around his bridge where 2 young cubs sat quietly watching the conversation. They didn't understand the human language, but they sensed the tension. One of them, a cub the crew had named Brave because of his courage during rescue operations, moved closer to Jake's chair in a protective gesture. "Admiral, with respect, these aren't creatures," Jake replied calmly. "They're children, and I won't abandon children who need our help." The communication ended with Admiral Stone's furious face. Jake knew that Earth ships were probably already on their way, but when he looked around his bridge and saw cubs working alongside his human crew, he felt no regret. "How many cubs do we have aboard now?" he asked Dr. Torres. 187, the doctor replied. "All healthy enough to travel. There are maybe 50 more in the city that we could still save." Jake made his final decision. "We save them all, even if it means we can never go home." The crew nodded in agreement. They had found something more important than following orders or avoiding consequences. They had found a purpose worth any sacrifice, protecting innocent lives that no one else would defend. 3 months had passed since the Endeavor left Drakmore with 200 Kythera cubs aboard. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of his ship, amazed by how much everything had changed. The sound of laughter echoed from the converted cargo holds where cubs played games that mixed human and Kythera traditions. "Captain Jake, Captain Jake," called a young voice in accented English. A small cub with golden fur came running down the hallway, his claws clicking on the metal floor. The crew had named him Sonny because of his bright personality and cheerful nature. "What is it, Sonny?" Jake asked, kneeling down to the cub's eye level. "Mama Emily needs help in the science room," Sonny said excitedly. "The big machine is making funny noises again." Jake smiled at hearing Dr. Carter called Mama Emily. The cubs had naturally started calling their human caregivers by family names. Dr. Torres was Papa Mike, Lisa Rodriguez was Sister Lisa, and Jake himself had become Father Jake to many of the younger cubs. In the science lab, Jake found Dr. Carter working with 3 older cubs on a complex computer problem. The cubs, now nearly the size of human teenagers, were helping her repair a damaged scanner with surprising skill. Their problem-solving abilities are incredible, Dr. Carter explained as the cubs worked. They see patterns that humans miss. Yesterday, Bright here figured out a solution to our power distribution problem that would have taken me weeks to discover. Bright, a tall cub with silver fur, looked up from the machine and spoke in careful English. Humans think in straight lines. Kythera minds think in circles. Both ways together work better. This was the remarkable discovery that Dr. Carter had been documenting. The cubs raised with human values were developing abilities that neither species had alone. They combined human creativity with Kythera instincts to become something entirely new. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Torres was experiencing the same phenomenon. Young cubs who had been trained in human medical techniques were proving to be exceptional healers. Their natural sensitivity to biological systems, combined with human compassion, made them incredibly effective at helping sick crew members. Watch this, Dr. Torres said to Jake as a cub named Gentle examined a human crew member with a sprained wrist. The cub's touch was incredibly delicate, and somehow she could sense exactly where the injury was most severe. "Hurt is here and here," Gentle said softly, pointing to spots that Dr. Torres's equipment had identified as the main problem areas. Medicine should go deep, not surface. But the most remarkable changes were happening in the cubs' behavior toward their human family. They had developed an intense loyalty that amazed everyone aboard. When engineer David Chen was injured in an accident, 6 cubs stayed by his bedside for 3 days, refusing to leave until he recovered. The incident that truly showed their devotion happened during a routine maintenance check. Lisa Rodriguez was working alone in a dangerous section of the ship when a power coupling exploded. She was trapped behind fallen debris with toxic gas filling the area. Before the human crew could organize a rescue, Razor, one of the larger cubs, had already acted. Using his natural strength and small size, he crawled through spaces too narrow for humans and reached Lisa. He carried her to safety through a route that no human would have thought possible. "Why did you risk yourself for me?" Lisa asked him later as Dr. Torres treated her injuries. Razor looked confused by the question. "You are family. Family protects family. This is what humans taught us." The cubs were learning human concepts of love and sacrifice, but they were expressing these feelings in ways that were uniquely their own. They formed protective groups around their favorite humans. They shared their food without being asked, and they worked together on tasks with a cooperation that adult Kythera had never shown. Commander Sarah Phillips discovered this when she was leading a combat training exercise. Several of the older cubs asked to participate, wanting to learn how to defend their human family. What she found shocked her. "They're natural soldiers," she reported to Jake after the session, "but not in the aggressive way their parents were. They fight to protect, not to conquer. They instinctively cover each other's weaknesses and support the humans in the group." The cubs were also changing the humans aboard the ship. Crew members who had been strangers before were now bonding over their shared responsibility for the young aliens. The ship felt more like a large family than a military vessel. Dr. Carter published her research findings in a secret report that would later change galactic understanding of the Kythera. The cubs show no signs of the telepathic aggression that made adult Kythera dangerous, she wrote. Instead, they display enhanced empathy and cooperative behavior. They have retained their species' strength and intelligence while developing human emotional bonds. The most touching example came when Jake fell ill with a severe fever. The cubs took turns sitting with him, bringing him food and water, and even singing soft Kythera lullabies that somehow made him feel better. When he recovered, he found drawings they had made showing him as part of their family group. "We drew you with fur like us," explained a young cub named Hope, "because you are our papa too, even if you look different." As the Endeavor traveled, Toward Earth, the Cubs were practicing human customs while teaching the crew about Cathera culture. They celebrated birthdays with modified human traditions, but they also shared their species' deep connection to natural cycles and their complex understanding of group harmony. The older Cubs had even started helping with ship operations. Their natural agility made them excellent at repairs in tight spaces, their strength helped with heavy lifting, and their pattern recognition abilities improved navigation calculations. "They're not just passengers anymore," Chief Engineer Chen told Jake as he watched Cubs working alongside human technicians. "They're crew members. They belong here." But Jake knew that the real test was still coming. Earth was only days away, and they still didn't know how humanity would react to their decision. The Cubs sensed the adults' tension and had started asking worried questions about their future. "Will the other humans like us?" asked Brave, now one of the Cubs' unofficial leaders. "Will they let us stay with our family?" added Swift, a quick-moving Cub who had become Lisa's constant companion. Jake looked at the Cubs who had become his children, at the crew who had become their parents, and at the miraculous family they had all created together. Whatever happened on Earth, he knew they had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had proven that love could overcome fear, that kindness could transform even the most feared species, and that family was not about biology, but about choice and commitment. The Cubs had chosen humanity, and humanity had chosen them back. The Endeavor approached Earth orbit surrounded by 12 military ships. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the home planet he might never see again as a free man. Beside him, 3 Cathera Cubs looked out at the blue world with wonder and fear. "It's beautiful," whispered Hope, a young female Cub with dark fur. "Is this really where humans come from?" "Yes, little one," Jake replied softly. "And if we're lucky, it will be your home too." The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Rebecca Stone appeared on the main screen, her expression cold and official. Behind her stood several other high-ranking officers and what appeared to be representatives from the Galactic Council. "Captain Morrison, you are under arrest for violation of direct orders and endangering human diplomatic relations," Admiral Stone announced. "Prepare to be boarded." Before Jake could respond, another voice came over the communication system. It was Dr. Emily Carter, speaking from the ship's laboratory. "Admiral, before you take any action, there's something you need to see. I'm transmitting our research data to Earth Command now." Jake watched as data flowed across his screens. Months of careful study, behavioral observations, and medical examinations of the Cubs. Video recordings of Cubs working alongside humans, solving problems and showing remarkable emotional development. On Earth below, something unprecedented was happening. News of the Endeavor's mission had spread despite government attempts to keep it secret. Crowds were gathering in major cities, holding signs that read, "Save the children," and "Humanity stands for mercy." Ambassador Lucas Wright had been secretly sending reports to civilian news organizations. The story of humans risking everything to save orphaned alien children had captured the world's imagination. People who had never cared about space exploration were demanding that their government protect the Cubs. "Admiral," Jake said calmly, "I request permission to bring 3 Cubs to the meeting. Let them speak for themselves." Admiral Stone looked uncertain. Behind her, Jake could see Galactic Council representatives arguing among themselves. The Zenthari ambassador was clearly angry, while others seemed curious about these famous Cubs. "This is highly irregular," Admiral Stone said finally, "but given the circumstances, I'll allow it." An hour later, Jake found himself in a United Nations Assembly Hall with Hope, Brave, and Swift beside him. The 3 Cubs wore simple blue uniforms that Dr. Carter had made for them, and they stood straight and proud despite their obvious nervousness. The hall was filled with world leaders, military officials, and representatives from dozens of alien species. News cameras broadcasted the event to billions of viewers across Earth and the galaxy. Hope stepped forward first. Though she was only 4 feet tall, her voice carried clearly through the hall as she spoke in perfect English. My name is Hope. The humans gave me this name because they said I represented hope for my people. Before the humans came, my family was dead. My world was empty. I was dying alone and afraid. The hall was completely silent. Even the hostile alien representatives leaned forward to listen. The humans could have left us to die. Their own leaders told them to leave us. But they stayed because they saw we were children who needed help. They fed us when we were hungry. They healed us when we were sick. They held us when we cried for our lost parents. Brave stepped forward next. I am called Brave because I was the first cub to trust the humans. But the real brave ones are sitting behind me. Captain Jake and his crew risked everything to save us. They became our new family when the galaxy said we didn't deserve to live. Swift spoke last. The humans taught us that being strong doesn't mean hurting others. It means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We want to use our strength to help, not to hurt. We want to be part of the human family. The impact was immediate and powerful. Several delegates were openly crying. The Zenthari ambassador looked uncomfortable, while other alien representatives seemed shocked by the cubs' intelligence and obvious love for their human caregivers. Dr. Carter took the podium next, presenting her scientific findings. These cubs show no signs of the aggressive telepathic abilities that made adult Kithara dangerous. Their brains have developed differently because of human nurturing. They represent a new kind of Kithara, one that chooses cooperation over domination. She showed video footage of cubs working with human crew members, solving complex problems, and displaying remarkable empathy. They've retained their species' natural abilities while developing human emotional responses. They're not just survivors. They're evidence that nurture can overcome nature. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Michael Torres presented medical data. These cubs have saved human lives aboard our ship. They've become skilled healers using their natural sensitivity combined with human medical knowledge. They're not just refugees. They're contributors to our community. The Galactic Council representatives requested a private meeting. Jake waited nervously, while alien ambassadors debated among themselves. Finally, they returned to the main hall. The Zenthari ambassador spoke first, his voice grudging but respectful. We have observed these cubs carefully. They are indeed different from their ancestors. However, we remain concerned about their future development. But then something unexpected happened. The Vortakian representative, Commander Velk, stood up and surprised everyone. We were wrong, he admitted publicly. We let fear and prejudice blind us to the suffering of innocent children. The humans have shown us what true civilization looks like. We formally apologize for our previous position. One by one, other alien representatives began changing their positions. The cubs' obvious intelligence, their clear emotional bonds with humans, and their potential contributions to galactic society had shifted public opinion across multiple worlds. The real turning point came when Earth's President Maria Santos addressed the Assembly. The question before us is simple. Do we choose fear or hope? Do we let prejudice decide the fate of innocent children? Or do we give them a chance to prove their worth? She gestured toward the cubs, who stood quietly listening to the debate about their future. These children have already proven their worth. They've shown courage, intelligence, and loyalty that would be admirable in any species. They've chosen humanity as their family, and humanity chooses them back. The vote was overwhelming. Earth would grant citizenship to all Kithara cubs rescued by the Endeavor. More importantly, the Galactic Council agreed to establish new protocols for protecting refugee children from any species, regardless of their ancestry. But the cubs had one more surprise for everyone. Hope approached the podium and asked permission to speak again. We want to thank all of you for giving us a chance, she said to the assembly. But we also want to make a promise. We will never forget that humans risked everything to save us, when no one else would. We promise to spend our lives protecting others who cannot protect themselves, just like Captain Jake and his crew protected us." As the assembly erupted in applause, Jake felt tears running down his face. These children he had rescued from a dying world were now promising to dedicate their lives to helping others. They had learned the best of human values and were ready to share them with the galaxy. Outside, crowds celebrated in the streets of Earth's major cities. Children held signs welcoming their new Cathera friends, and families volunteered to help with the Cubs' continued care and education. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity and the former apex predators stood together, no longer as enemies, but as family. The Cubs who had been abandoned by everyone had found not just survival, but purpose in human civilization. The greatest rescue in galactic history was complete, but the real adventure was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the Cubs first arrived on Earth. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the command center of the joint human Cathara exploration ship Unity. Beside him, Hope had grown into a tall, graceful young adult who served as his first officer. Her golden fur had darkened with age, but her eyes still held the same warmth and intelligence that had touched his heart years ago. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler system," reported Communications Officer Swift, who had become one of the galaxy's most skilled translators. "It's coming from a Hegemony Coalition colony ship." Jake smiled at how naturally Swift had taken to her role. All the Cubs had found their places in human society, but many had chosen careers that allowed them to help others. It seemed to be their way of honoring the rescue that had saved their lives. "Set course for the Kepler system," Jake ordered. "Looks like we have another rescue mission." The Unity was unlike any ship in the galaxy. Its crew was half human and half Cathera, working together with an efficiency that amazed other species. The young Cathera had grown into their full size, standing 8 feet tall with impressive strength and agility. But their personalities remained gentle and cooperative, shaped by years of human influence. In the medical bay, Dr. Bright worked, alongside human doctors to treat injured colonists. Her natural ability to sense biological problems, combined with human medical training, made her one of the most sought-after healers in known space. She had personally saved hundreds of lives, across multiple species. "The colonists have some kind of radiation poisoning," Bright reported to Jake. "But we can help them. Gentle is already preparing the treatment chambers." Gentle had become the head of the ship's medical department, her natural empathy making her especially good at comforting scared patients. Children from any species seemed to trust her immediately, perhaps sensing the kindness that humans had taught her. Down in engineering, Razor worked with human technicians to repair the colonists' damaged ship. His problem-solving abilities had made him famous throughout the Id galaxy. Planets specifically requested his help when facing complex technical challenges. "The fusion reactor is completely fried," Razor reported through the communication system. "But I think we can build a temporary replacement using parts from both ships. Give me 6 hours." As the rescue mission continued, Jake reflected on how much had changed. The Cubs were no longer children. They were full adults who had become leaders in their chosen fields. But they still maintained the close family bonds they had formed with their human caregivers. Dr. Emily Carter, now the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies development, was working on the bridge alongside several of her former children. She had documented their growth and development in books that were studied throughout known space. "The radiation levels are dropping," she reported. "Razor's repairs are working perfectly." The real miracle wasn't just that the Cubs had survived and thrived. It was what they had accomplished together with humans. The hybrid community had become a model for the entire galaxy. Their combined abilities had led to breakthroughs in medicine, engineering, and exploration that neither species could have achieved alone. Brave, now a captain of his own ship, arrived to help with the rescue mission. His vessel, the Compassion, was crewed entirely by former Cubs who had dedicated their lives to emergency response. They had saved over 50,000 lives in the past 2 years alone. Uncle Jake, Brave called over the communication system, using the family title that all the Cubs still used. "My crew is ready to assist. Where do you need us?" The family structure had remained strong even as the Cubs became adults. They still called their human caregivers by family names, and the humans had legally adopted many of them. Jake had 12 official children now, all Cathera adults who had chosen to keep his family name. As the rescue operation concluded successfully, Jake received a priority message from Earth. President Santos appeared on his screen, smiling broadly. "Admiral Morrison, I have good news. The Galactic Council has unanimously voted to establish the Morrison Protocol for Refugee Assistance. It's named after your original mission and will ensure that no refugee children are ever abandoned because of their species." Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Cubs' transformation had changed more than just their own lives. It had changed how the galaxy thought about mercy and second chances. But the most important change was happening in the newest generation. Human children who had grown up alongside young Cathara were developing enhanced empathy and problem-solving skills. They seemed to naturally understand cooperation and inclusion in ways that previous generations had struggled with. On Earth, schools that included both human and Cathara students were producing remarkable results. Children who learned from both species developed abilities that amazed educators and parents alike. Hope approached Jake as he finished his conversation with the president. "Father Jake, there's something we want to show you." She led him to the ship's main observation deck, where all the former Cubs who served on the Unity had gathered. In the center of the room stood a beautiful memorial made of crystalline Cathara, material and human metals, blended together in a design that represented both species. "We've been working on this in secret," Hope explained. "It's a memorial to our birth parents and to the humans who saved us. We wanted to honor both the family we lost and the family we found." The memorial was engraved with names in both human and Cathara languages. At the top it read, "To those who gave us life, and to those who gave us love, we carry both legacies forward." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes as he read the inscription. The Cubs had never forgotten their origins, but they had transformed their tragedy into purpose. "There's more," said Swift, stepping forward with a formal document. "We've established the Hope Foundation for Refugee Children. It will provide rescue and care for orphaned children of any species, anywhere in the galaxy. And we're funding it with our earnings from the past 5 years," added Gentle. "Every credit we've made from our work is going toward helping other children who need families." Jake looked around at the remarkable adults these Cubs had become. They were doctors, engineers, explorers, and peacekeepers. They had used their abilities to help others and their platform to speak for those who had no voice. But most importantly, they had proven that the galaxy's greatest strength was not in weapons or technology, but in compassion and the willingness to see past fear to find hope. As the Unity traveled toward its next mission, Jake watched Hope command the bridge with skill and confidence. She caught his eye and smiled, the same warm, trusting smile she had given him 5 years ago when she was a frightened, hungry cub. "Where to next, Admiral?" she asked. "Wherever we're needed most," Jake replied. "We have a galaxy to take care of." Through the viewports, stars stretched endlessly ahead of them. Somewhere out there were probably more children who needed help, more species that needed to learn about cooperation, and more opportunities to prove that kindness was the greatest force in the universe. The Cubs who had been abandoned by everyone had grown up to become the galaxy's greatest protectors. They had learned from humanity's example and then made it their mission to extend that same mercy to others. The rescue that had started with 200 orphaned cubs had become a movement that was transforming the entire galaxy, one act of kindness at a time. And it all began because one human captain decided that saving innocent children was worth any risk.